I know what it's like when you first start, and that feeling of this kind of desperation, And I'd hate to think that people were struggling in that way, especially when working with kids and doing such an important job, because it really is important.
Hello, and welcome to another series of I Taught English Abroad, a podcast by the TEFL org. It's our third series of interviews with prominent and upcoming figures in the TEFL world, covering topics like travel, starting a business, presenting yourself online, exploring your potential, and, well, obviously, teaching. Once again, we're your one-stop shop for the best advice and stories when it comes to teaching English as a foreign language. Without giving too much away, today's guest Jema Perry will describe her early teaching career in China as a disaster. Yet when I spoke to her, she'd established herself as one of the leading voices in TEFL, had a self-made t-shirt on that said teacher in different colours, and leads Mooncake English, an extremely popular resource for educators. Now you'd imagine there's a very compelling story between those 2 points, and indeed there is. Here's Jema's story. I'm delighted to say I'm here with Jema Perry. How are you doing today, Jema?
Great, thanks so much for having me on.
Not at all, we were excited to get you on. You're another one of our guests with this amazing online presence, and we will get into all that. But I kind of just want to take you right back to the start. So what was life like for you before you got your TEFL certificate in 2011? Did you have specific kind of career goals in mind? Did you always plan to travel? What was I know it's a big question to start off with, but what was your kind of master plan before your career really kicked into gear?
Well, yeah, it is a big question. But I actually hadn't thought too much about teaching English when I first started, before I started. I actually worked in the leisure industry. I was a lifeguard, I was a fitness instructor, and fitness was a big thing in my life. That was something that I loved doing. And if you'd asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I really didn't know. The only thing I did know is that I wanted to go abroad and have the experience of like learning a new language and traveling. And that was the only thing that I knew, and kind of fell into this leisure industry kind of jobs. But I think it was around 2010, maybe a little bit earlier, I actually had a cycling accident where I crashed. It's a long story, but I essentially cycled as fast as I could into the back of a stationary car. And that messed up my back. It was for around 3 months, I couldn't walk. And there was a really, years and years long recovery process after that. And so I needed to change careers. I couldn't do these active things that I'd always done. And I was thinking, like, what is it that I really want to do? What's my passion? And traveling, and like I say, having that experience of learning a new language was it. That's what I wanted to do. So I started thinking about, where to go and how I might be able to do that. And teaching English seemed like a good option. It was something that would allow me to earn money whilst traveling. And I'd always worked with kids in sports and things, and I thought that I'd be good at too. So I'd always had kind of kindergarten in my mind when I thought about English teaching. Definitely adults and older students weren't my thing. But then I started exploring, thinking about where to go, and I was looking at Japan initially. But Japan was quite an expensive place to get to and to get set up to start a career there. So I started looking at China. And from my research at that time, there was lots of opportunities, lots of jobs, although a little intimidating because, coming from the UK, we hear different stories about China. And, basically you grow up thinking it's this, dictatorship and communist country. So it was a bit scary to think about going. But the more research that I did, it seemed to like there were good career options there. Definitely a place that I could go to, have this experience that I really wanted, and find work to be able to fund myself. And that's how it all started.
Amazing. So talk me through the process of getting your TEFL certificate and then kind of researching countries. Was it something you wanted to start right away? Was it something that, you got an idea of where you wanted to go and then you had your mindset on it? What was that whole process like, and how quickly did it take for you to find work?
Well, I do this all the time, and that's I take a big jump into the deep end. This is how I operate in life, I think. And I didn't do my TEFL certificate until I got to China. I decided that's it. This is what I want to do. I want to go to China. I'm going to do my TEFL and teach at least for a year. And that involved saving up for a year because I needed to have money to take with me. And this was at the time where, 2011, the recession was in full swing. People didn't have money. It was a very unstable time. So it did take me a good year to save up enough. But even when I went, I didn't have too much. And I paid for an in-person 1 month long TEFL certificate. And I thought that would be a good starting point because I would meet people from the course. And that would be a way to kind of break into the country a little bit more comfortably, especially going there as not knowing anyone and not knowing the language. I went. It was very scary, but being able to have that foundation of I know I need to be at this place for the TEFL certificate and starting that process gave me that kind of stability there and that starting point, which I think was much needed when you're first, when I was starting, trying to find a job, you worry about that a lot. But usually through TEFL companies, once you do qualify, they point you in the right direction of, where to find work, legit work, of trying to avoid the kind of scam jobs and things that are out there, especially in China. So that was great to have that kind of stability. But, I did find that the TEFL certificate challenging initially. It was something new for me. But it was helpful for sure to, as I say, have that initial startup in a new country.
Definitely. And let's zero in on that a little bit. As you say there, you kind of had mixed feelings about China, but then kind of gained enthusiasm. And you talk about launching in at the deep end. It doesn't really get any bigger than Beijing. So with that being such a huge place, do you think that actually served you better to go somewhere so massive and so busy in order to really immerse yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I think, the benefit of a larger city is that there is more kind of support around. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a massive challenge. You really, especially if you're going somewhere like it's the complete opposite of culture or languages that you speak. It is very hard, but in a bigger city, there are more resources. There's an expat community. There are some people that speak English, or there's ways of getting around with support. But if you go somewhere that's in a much smaller community, you're merging yourself in this very small community where people probably haven't seen a foreigner before, just speaking to China specifically, and are going to be a little bit wary of you, and you're not going to have as big of a support in terms of expat community or more Western food when you when you really crave it. So the bigger cities offer that, and a lot more opportunities as well, because it's such a big place, especially Beijing. It's still growing now. And when I went in 2011, it was the height of the kindergarten industry. The business was booming, schools were opening everywhere, and teachers were needed. So there was lots of opportunity, but also in this kind of quote unquote safe space where there were other expats and other people who were going through a similar thing as you make that big leap.
Actually, I think it's important to pick up on the fact that there were all these new kindergartens and schools opening. So what was that like? Did you feel very much in demand having done your TEFL certificate and having moved over there and gone through all that process of securing a visa, that kind of thing? Did that give you a level of confidence, or was there a lot of competition? And maybe it was a wee bit cutthroat. Just talk us through your feelings at that point.
It wasn't competition as such. In fact, it was like people were fighting for me. There was definitely a high demand for teachers at that time, and still to this day. But it was finding the right role, a good school that was going to be able to offer growth or was going to be able to support me, because I hadn't taught before. This was something very new. And to be honest, I was a rabbit in a headlight. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I went for a couple of interviews, and even in the interviews, they asked for a demo class. That was a new thing. And I was really nervous. And the only resources that I had was online, to go on YouTube and see what other people had been doing, and looking at classes that they'd done for demos, and trying to just guess basically what I needed to do for those interviews. So it was kind of, it was nerve-wracking and scary, but mainly just because I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I didn't have confidence. I didn't have the experience teaching. And I wasn't sure what's going to be a good school to work at. Like, how do you navigate that? All these people want you to go to their schools and work. They're offering you different deals. And even at that point, you don't know in terms of like salaries and stuff, what you should be asking for, what's a good deal, what's not a good deal. So it was really difficult to kind of navigate. I think I initially went through an agency though. And again, that's not something I would recommend. but I was lucky. I did end up with a good one just purely by luck. And they pointed me into the direction of the school, which I ultimately ended up working at for 10 years, and got all this great experience from. So I feel really lucky because I don't think that was intentional. It wasn't like I went looking for a job of like, yeah, this is going to be somewhere I stay long term. But I definitely would recommend when you're looking for work to talk, if you can, talk to some teachers that are there and hear about their experiences. And is it a supportive environment? Are you given training? And how is it to work with your colleagues? Because sometimes it can be a toxic environment, and sometimes it's good. You have to kind of really do a little bit of research to find out. So yeah, it was a scary scary challenge, but I really lucked out in the end.
Yeah, and before we get into the specifics of the school that you worked at, because I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff to mine there, just kind of going into sort of settling phase again and getting used to the Chinese culture, especially in a big city like that. How long would you say it took you to, I don't know if assimilate is the right word, but there's a lot going on very quickly. So how do you think that helped you settle? Or do you think it was a more sort of slow process? Like, at what point did you feel China is home to me now?
Oh, years later. Years later. Yeah. Like the first year, especially like the first 6 months, I cried a lot. I wanted to go home. Like I'd gone there alone. I didn't know anyone. I didn't know the language, and it was really overwhelming. It was really and like I said, I still hadn't taught, so everything was new. And yeah, so it was a really big challenge. But I was really lucky that, especially in those first couple of years, the school that I did end up working at had a couple of teachers there that were just fantastic. They really took me in and helped me learn how to teach and how to be with kids and how to get kids to listen and how to engage them in class. And I needed that support. And if it wasn't for them, none of the rest of my career would have happened. But outside of that, they were also there as friends, and they supported me, and we did things together, and that helped me start to settle in. So yeah, definitely initially I needed that support. But as the years went on, it really was a case of, I started learning Mandarin. I did 4 years in school, and that was a big effort. It was, 4 classes a week, I think, of 2-hour classes a day, because I really wanted to be able to communicate and start to understand more about this world that I was living in. And it's not until you really get the language that you can start. You still miss out lots of things. There's a lot of cultural differences. But it wasn't until I could start speaking Mandarin that I could really start to connect with friends and colleagues from China in a deeper way and start to understand the culture more, and sort of build my own community. So yeah, I would say around 3 or 4 years before I was like, yeah, this is home for me right now. This is where I'm meant to be.
That, for anyone listening, just shows the virtues of patience and really getting into the depths of the culture. And I think people are going to take away a lot from that. So let's get into the actual teaching. So you had you had a very important role for your first job. You're leading as a teacher in a newly opened kindergarten. So what were your initial strategies in terms of capturing students' attention, managing the class, as well as learning on the go how to teach? Can you describe all of that for us? Because there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, I mean, initially it was a disaster. I had classes where, I would be trying to teach and the kids would just run away, because I didn't know what I was doing, I didn't know how to engage them. And that was hard for me at first, and I've spoken to a lot of teachers over the years who have the similar experience of that makes you want to quit, right? I want to be good at this, but I don't know how to do it. And I should just, that's it. I'm going to get fired because I'm not very good at my job. But like I said, I was really lucky to be working with a couple of teachers, and they started to show me like, okay, well, you need to have rhythm in your class. You need to use TPR. You need to have chants. You need to have fun. And it was when I started to understand that element and kind of let go of this idea of, letting myself be silly in the class and relax a bit with the kids. That is when things started to change and kind of get out of this deer in headlights kind of mode. But they're giving me those teachers giving me these initial kind of game ideas and, as I said, song ideas, helped me then to take that and make small changes in other classes so I could start to plan by myself. And I was able to start observing other teachers' classes and see how they were doing things in the classroom. And that's really helpful too, to see how they manage transitions. And that was a big thing for me, is like transitioning from one activity to the next. And especially as a lead teacher in the class, because it was full day English immersion, where I'm supposed to be like the main teacher in the class, but going from one activity to the next, again, you lose the kids, right? They're 2-3 years old. So they run everywhere. And you have to think about safety as you transition, so that we don't have kids running into things or falling over. And so really learning how to manage those transitions. I found it's exhausting, because it really is, you have to be leading them throughout the whole day in a fun, energetic way, through games, but it's all controlled with these games. It can be very, very exhausting, but then when at the end of the day, when you get through it, you're like, wow, okay, they're listening to me. I'm doing this. I'm actually teaching. Like I'm getting better. And then as I started to learn those different things and get better at it, then you start to feel more confident, and you continue to learn. Like even to this day, I'm still learning new ideas and strategies and game ideas, songs and chants from people who are doing this for the first time. They do the same thing. They see what someone does and then changes it to their situation, and we learn from that. So I think it was very difficult, but I was very open to learning. And I think that's the most important thing when you first start, because you are going to make mistakes and it is going to be challenging. You just have to be open to making those mistakes and learning from them.
Yeah, there's two really important threads from that. Firstly, I don't know what TPR is, so could you explain that for us?
Yeah, so TPR, the acronym is Total Physical Response, and it basically just means you're putting an action to what you're teaching. And lots of teachers get caught up with that. They think that a simple example is running. So when you say running, you run on the spot, and so kids can put that action to the word, and it helps them to remember. But and that's where teachers get caught, because you don't always have to have an action that makes sense to the word that you're saying. Just putting any kind of movement to a word. Like when I was teaching colors, I would teach, red, and I would just move my hand like this as I say the word red. And that helps students remember, just that action. What I talk about when I coach teachers is always think about an action and a sound with a chant, and that's how I would put things in. So with red, for example, instead of just saying the word red and asking students to repeat, I'd be like, it's red, boing, boing, it's red, boing, boing. The action, the sound, and the chant help students remember. So that's what, TPR with kindergarten students, it's a great tool to help them pick up the new words and vocabulary and sentences that you're teaching, but also gets them moving, gives them something to do, which is great, because they have so much energy, and we have to incorporate movement when you're working with those young students. They can't just sit down like an adult and learn that way.
I hear you. There's another kind of thing that really jumps out at me there, especially given that teaching wasn't always in mind for you. There was another sort of career before that, but it seems like really, really early on, beyond just getting a TEFL certificate, which is a great thing to do, everyone should get one. Definitely. There's a real devotion to your craft in terms of watching other teachers, developing or studying methodology. When did the nuts and bolts of teaching really start appealing to you? Because especially in relation to what you do now, the kind of behind the scenes, if you like, bits of teaching in terms of methodology, approaches, when did you catch that bug, so to speak? Was that quite early on as well? Because it seems as though you realised there was a whole world to this.
Yeah, kind of. Like I say, when I initially was going to teach, I went online to try and find ideas and support, or someone to tell me how to do it and what to do it. And there were a few people that really stuck out. There's Genki English. Like I loved his stuff, his videos, and his approach to teaching. And so I watched a lot of his things, but his coaching videos, so where he was giving training to teachers, I liked watching those videos, and also seeing how he explained things. And then also looking at more the early years development side of things, and not just ESL, because when you're working in kindergarten, you have to understand as well that they're really young, and like where are they developmentally in terms of their physical or social emotional development, so that when you're planning, you can plan something that's age appropriate, that's appropriate for the development stage that they are at. And there was a great lady who she's called the Oogly Googly lady, I think, and she had a lot of videos online too, with songs and things. And she talks a lot about having fun, but she does it in a kind of adult way, like, hey, do you know what? Yeah, kids are annoying sometimes, but they're kids, and this is why they're like that, and this is what we can do to engage them. And I learned loads from watching her videos. So yeah, it's like there was a few people online that had these different approaches, as I say, that developmental side of things, like kids growing up, and then that ESL side of things. So I could learn the basics behind there. And then it wasn't until then I started teaching, and I was in this environment that was kind of messy and unorganized, that I realized, okay, well, I need to start putting something together that's going to work in this situation. And I think every school is different. I speak to teachers and they're like, do you sell a curriculum? And I'm like, well, no, there's not one curriculum that's going to work for every scenario. And it's really about having that background information so that whatever situation you go into, you know how to adjust your lessons and how to, what methods to incorporate based on the things, the knowledge and what you know and what you're seeing in the classroom. So yeah, it didn't really happen until I was here kind of doing it. I did look at research a bit before I went to China. And I had these visions of, hopefully one day doing that, being someone that could teach this kind of thing, because it looked like fun. That oogly googly lady, Genki English, they looked like they were having fun. Looked like this experience was, it was just looked like something I wanted to do. So, I've envisioned that as I headed out to China.
And talking of the online TEFL community, we'll explore how Jema's contributed after the break.
Feeling inspired? Fancy trying something completely new? Well, make your best move yet by signing up for a TEFL course with the most highly accredited provider on the planet. Here at the TEFL org, we offer a range of online and classroom courses that you can study at your own pace. All of our courses include top-of-the-range teaching materials and come with dedicated tutor support from experienced and highly qualified TEFL experts. And what's more, we'll give you money off to do it. Just enter the code PODCAST at checkout to get 50% off any of our internationally recognised TEFL courses. And that includes our best-selling 120-hour Premier Online course. With that code, you'll not only get 50% off, but you'll also get a free lesson plans pack. Within a matter of months, you could be a qualified TEFL teacher, out there exploring the world, or working to your own schedule from home as an online English teacher. Just use the code PODCAST at checkout to get started.
And we're back with Jema Perry. So you've, ingratiated yourself, you've become part of this kindergarten experience, you're learning on the job, you're bringing all these great methodologies into practice, and then you become the international program manager for, is it Gembrio School? So tell me about that.
Yeah, Gembrio Schools is who I worked for. Yeah. It was, again, a role that kind of came up. This, as I say, when I went to China, it was the height of the kindergarten industry. And I started working with Gembrio, and they were very disorganized. They were kind of a new company. There wasn't much structure to the management or the running of the school. In terms of curriculum, we had a few curriculums that just weren't working in the classrooms. And, teachers were struggling to find them. There was no kind of training structure involved. And when I first went into this role, I started just as trying to be a support for teachers. And that might be just helping them get materials that they need, or offering them to come see my class, or things like this. And actually it was a really difficult kind of challenge initially, for two reasons, I think. Because first, I was learning how to motivate and support as a manager, and I wasn't very good at it at the beginning. I made a lot of mistakes. And then the other element was that, because things were so unstructured, trying as what I was people's colleagues, then to their supervisor, and then trying to put structure into a place, it meant that there was this, good 2-year transition period of implementing this transition and getting people on board. And, some people left because they didn't like having structure there. So there was I enjoyed it because I was learning a lot. I was learning how to be a better manager, I started doing training with teachers and how to do that in a way that motivates people. I was starting to put some structure in terms of the management, which helped bridge that gap a little bit between the Chinese management and the foreign staff, because there was a lot of misunderstanding all the time between both parties and within the classrooms as well, with the Chinese teachers and the foreign teachers. So I started slowly trying to be that kind of communicator to help people understand both points of view. It's a challenge. It was a good challenge. And definitely something I learned a lot from and grew from. I made a lot of mistakes in those initial years, definitely. But I learned so much from that. And it's really helped me as my career has gone on over the past few years.
So talk me through the kind of transition between different stages, being a teacher, being a supervisor, being a manager. You mentioned there that there were maybe some folk who, I don't know, felt a bit of friction against the idea of structures being in place. And obviously you're in China, but as a foreign teacher, and that can cause, there might be some kind of ego element to that for other teachers, maybe a bit of abrasiveness there. I mean, obviously I don't want to project negative personality traits onto anyone, but it sounds like, firstly, when did you sort of realize that you're going to take on more of a leadership role? And secondly, how easy or difficult was it to manage some of the working relationships over two different languages? There's so much going on there.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I wasn't very good at it initially, managing that transition to supervising. And teachers, actually, to be honest, we ended up having to fire a lot of people. And that's really hard. That was hard for me to sort of start as I've never fired anyone before. But, people just didn't want to work in a more organized structure. They liked the freedom that they had, which is absolutely fine. And there's lots of jobs in China where there aren't many expectations from the teachers in the classrooms, but for what the school wanted to do and the level it wanted to reach, we needed to have more structure in there and to make parents happy and make sure that what we were doing in the classroom was having an effect. We were teaching the kids. Parents were getting what they paid for, and these 2 to 3 year olds that were left with us for a full day were getting the care and attention and support that they deserved. It was difficult. We did have to, as I say, transition through teachers which became easier. Some stayed and made the changes and got on board. Others, it's easier when someone comes in for the first time because you set that standard. This is who we are. This is what our expectations are. And that's how you slowly build the bar over time. But in terms of like the Chinese staff and the foreign staff, it was really difficult at times because, initially with the foreign teachers could do basically anything they wanted. There was this freedom for that. And that kind of brought up a lot of resentment from the local staff who had a very tough job and were left to do a lot of the work. But as more structure came in, we were able to kind of bridge that gap a little bit and say, well, yes, this is the foreign teacher's role and this is your role in the classroom, and we need to work together in that. And there was still some friction between the staff, but the fact that I could speak to both parties and understand both sides made things a little bit easier. If there was a situation, I could be like, well, this is why you're being asked to do it this way, and this is why we can't do this. Because the culture here is just like that. And then the same the other way, I can explain, well, from the foreign teacher's perspective, this is why they want to do this or why they're asking to do this. And I could also then speak to the foreign teachers sometimes and present, give feedback in a way that's better received, because sometimes that language barrier, it's not the words, but it's the way it's spoken. And there were times where, teachers were just trying to give feedback because they wanted a teacher to do well. They wanted them to be a better teacher. But the way that it came across, the tone might have been a little bit sarcastic and that wasn't the intention from the teachers. So sometimes I would be that person, they would give me that feedback and I could present that feedback in a way that would be received better. And that helped. And then eventually those teachers would build better relationships. And we implemented this thing where we'd have every month the classroom teachers could go out to eat together. So school would pay for that. And that really helped because it got people out of the classroom, away from work. Maybe they have a few beers, some hot pot or whatever. And, saw each other as people a bit more. And again, that really helped build those relationships. And it took time. It was a really big school. Like I think at the height of the main campus that I worked at, we had like 500 students. age 2 to 6 years old. It was a really big school. So it was hard to build that relationship and bridge that gap between the local staff and the Chinese staff, but it is something that we managed to do over time.
So just right at the start of that answer, you reached our self-deprecation threshold. So there'll be no more calling yourself rubbish at any stage. It's officially banned now. In all seriousness, I mean, that leadership role you took on, it advanced. And if I'm right, you started implementing different curricula that you designed, and you had to ensure the smooth running of English programs across multiple campuses. So talk to us about how you went from being solely a kindergarten teacher to this person who's responsible for all these staff, implementing curricula. How was that for you? Did you feel like it was all happening really, really quickly? What was it like?
Yeah, initially I did. I kind of fought for the role because I was like, well, I can see what we need. We need this kind of system in place to manage and bring in staff. And then we can build this curriculum over time. And then I got the role. And then I was like, oh, wait, I know what to do, but I don't know how to do it. And I had this kind of panic initially of like, okay, now I'm responsible for all of this. I have to figure out how to do it. But in terms of curriculum, as I'd been teaching and I'd been learning and getting better at the craft, I'd been keeping, track of what classes I'd been teaching and what things had worked and what hadn't worked and how to, transition everything together. And this curriculum was slowly starting to come together anyway. But once I took on this role and I was responsible for trying to put in this structure that worked across multiple schools, we initially started in our main campus in Beijing. And again, it was a case of trial and error with the teachers. So we took a good 4 years to try what we had already in terms of curriculum. And I was really fortunate that we had hired some teachers that were qualified early years educators. So, I understood the ESL side of things, but that early years, that side of things, although I'd been reading about it, wasn't my area of expertise. But having these teachers come on board, we had like a curriculum group that then we were able to contribute that side of things to make sure that the curriculum that we were creating was age appropriate and was going to be suitable. We weren't asking kids to do things that they just weren't ready to do. And that was great. And as I say, it did take a good 4 years. We tried it out, got feedback from teachers, and then made some more changes. But I think the main challenge was the fact that every city is just such a different situation. It's really easy in a big city like Beijing or Shanghai to have, this management system in place or this hiring procedure in place and then have this curriculum and this is how we're going to run the program. But when you get to these smaller cities, there's more challenges, like I think it was Guangzhou. It's very hot in the summer and they have like a 2-hour lunch break. So whereas we'd be asking teachers to do some planning, you get an hour lunch break, but we'd have planning, we'd have meetings and we'd do all these other things. That didn't work in those cities, And then it was a case, well, how do you get those teachers on board to try and follow this? And even things like doing early morning exercise, it's a Chinese tradition in kindergartens where the kids come to school and you do some dances together. It was like, well, how can I get everyone on board in these smaller cities to do these things that not everyone wants to do at like 8 a.m. But so yeah, there were times where I went out to different schools and had to try and adjust and try and again build those relationships between the management and the foreign teachers there, so that with an idea, using the structure as an idea base, they together could work out what's going to be best for the school. And sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. Because as I say, not one curriculum is going to work in every school. And it's a lot about, the people that are implementing it more so than the actual curriculum. But there was a lot of challenges and a lot of growth for me, for the teachers. And I think especially on our main campus, having the teachers involved with that also gave them purpose and growth and let them feel like they were part of something and not just there doing their thing and going home, which was great too. I saw a lot of growth from my team there and I was really proud of the curriculum at the end.
And talking of growth, actually, there's, I think people are going to listen to us and be inspired anyway, because, going from doing a 1-month TEFL certificate in China to becoming a principal and a curriculum designer, that's going to be inspiring for people anyway. But not to give too many of your secrets away, because that's not the intention. What traits and attributes would you say that people need in order to go from just landing somewhere and learning to being someone of real influence and real importance? You know, what kind of mental attributes do you think a teacher needs if they want to climb the ladder and become as influential as you are?
That's a great question. I think empathy and patience have to be two of the biggest ones, because there's a lot of frustrations when you're working in an intercultural environment, things that you don't understand, communication problems, things will happen that make you angry that you think is just wrong, but it's part of the culture. So you have to be patient and open to understanding. You know, you don't have to agree with everything that goes on around you, but you do have to be patient and open. And empathy is the other one, because with teaching, especially when you're teaching in kindergarten, you know, you're working with very young children. You have parents who are putting all their trust and faith in you. You have the rest of your teaching team who are doing the same. And it gets emotional, you know, and especially if you're, as a foreign teacher, you're away from home, you're missing your family, you are in this environment, which can be very difficult and challenging. And, you know, if you're managing a team of teachers, you have to be you have to empathize with their situations and what they're going through. And that doesn't mean that you let them do whatever they want, or like, you know, you don't manage them. But I always found that I needed to be more than just what you would be a manager in the Western world, because it's more than a job. You know, you become a bit of a support for people, both the local staff and the foreign staff. And yeah, so I think having that empathy and being able to understand that everyone's going through stuff, and the environment, it's a difficult environment. It's an intercultural environment with very young kids, which is a stressful environment with a lot of pressure. So understanding that and being open and patient as you go through the different experiences you have as a teacher definitely have to be some of the most important ones.
Brilliant. And just before we go to a quick break, you touched on, well, you mentioned parents there. I don't know if it's a misconception, but certainly an idea people have when they think about teaching English in China, obviously with the ban of tutoring for school-age pupils out of school hours, I think people get the idea that maybe parents are on top of teachers a wee bit. Yeah. And that's maybe something that could put people off if they want to teach there. Is that a misconception, or is there a reality to that? I mean, obviously the majority of parents, they aren't, you know, not everyone's going to be the same, but what was your kind of reflection on teaching from that perspective?
I mean, there's definitely some truth to it. And again, this is something I would always look for in a school, is that relationship with parents and how that's formed. Like some schools, maybe some language schools, will just give parents whatever they want. You know, parents have a lot of control because, you know, especially now, it's a very difficult industry in China, the ESL industry, in terms of running a business and making money there. So keeping parents happy becomes a big, really important thing, because you can't afford to lose any students. But I did find, you know, just using my school as an example, initially parents did have all the power, and what they wanted, we just adjusted to that. But as the school became more structured, you know, not only from my side and the international program, but just generally overall, there was more kind of not power, but just control of like, this is what we do, this is what we offer, we know what we're talking about. And so therefore, you know, trust us. And that's how things would be presented to parents. So most parents would, because, you know, the way things are introduced gives them that trust. And that's why they end up choosing the school. And I think it's the same when you're a teacher with parents. You know, if you can show that you know their students, you know where they're at and what they need. And again, this all comes back to that background knowledge, right? And being able to understand, recognize what's going on with students in the classroom, knowing what they need, whether that's developmentally or whether that's with their language learning, and letting parents know that and what you're going to do about that as a teacher. That helps build that trust. And when you have trust from parents, they let you do it. They let you do your thing. But it's when you haven't built that relationship and haven't built that trust up, that parents are just going with what they know. And they do have a lot of pressure. There's huge pressure for parents in China to make sure that kids know English and can do all these different after-school activities. And I know the government's, you know, banning those kinds of things now, but the pressure is still there for parents. And actually, from before I left, a lot of them were concerned because now they don't have these resources of after-school activities, but the pressure to get kids to the same level is still there. So it's difficult for them. And again, it's that empathy, right? It's being able to understand things from their perspective, but also letting them know, like, hey, I know what I'm doing, and this is what I've seen, and this is what I think is the next step for little Jimmy or little Sammy or whoever.
Yeah, managing relationships is so important. I think that's one of the key things, one of the key takeaways from this podcast. We're just going to take another quick break, and then after that, we'll talk all about Jema's involvement with Mooncake English.
Are you looking for a weekly guide to what's going on in the TEFL world? Do you want some advice on everything from job interviews to underrated TEFL destinations? Well, the TEFL blog has it all. Every single week, we tackle some of the biggest questions in the TEFL industry. Stay up to date with the latest trends in English teaching, find tips to make your next job application your best yet, or get inspired and read about the experiences of TEFL graduates teaching all around the world. Whether you're brand new to the industry or you've seen it all, we can guarantee an interesting read each week. To find out more, go to tefl.org/blog. That's tefl.org/blog.
We're back with Jema Perry. So I want to talk about Mooncake English. First of all, where did the name come from? Because I like it.
Oh, it was just random. My partner and I were sat and just chatting. I was like, I want to do this. I want to start this channel. I don't know what it should be called. And they were just like, how about Mooncake English? I think it was the October Festival. I think the Mooncake Festival. And that's just how it came about. And I was like, okay, that's it. We'll stick to that.
Sometimes the best name is just the best name. So tell me all about building that brand, because I mean, it is a brand in essence, and it encompasses YouTube, blogs, materials, that kind of thing. You've already described to us an extremely busy career. So what was it like starting that brand alongside what you were doing day to day? Did you find that the two actually mixed really well together?
Yeah, it was a big undertaking for sure. I think one video would take at least a full day. Maybe longer if, initially, because I was still learning how to do everything. But at the same time, because of the school was so big and beautiful, I had the resources to film there. For example, a lot of the videos are filmed in what was the library. And I had this big, beautiful light place to go and film, which just matched perfectly with how I wanted to present myself. So, having those resources there were great. And I was in, the classroom all the time. And I was able to take things that I was teaching teachers, in my team and just make them into videos. So it was kind of, it matched in that sense, but it was definitely, I've had to take a bit of a break these past couple of years after COVID and everything, because for a long time it was just working nonstop. Be working my full-time job, which was more than the, your 9 to 5. It was almost every day. And then on top of that, trying to make sure I had a video. But I made a commitment and I was like, well, I'm going to do this for a year. I'll get a video out there every week for a year. And then we'll see how the response is and whether it's helping people, and go from there. And the way I looked at it was I've always loved making videos and trying to present things in a way that's kind of fun. So I try to put a lot of my humor into the videos as well. So I saw, even after a year, no one's really watching. Well, at least I've learned more about making videos and had some fun doing it.
You talk about injecting your own kind of humor into the videos, that kind of thing. And obviously, given the reception to your videos and the popularity of your channel, it did take off. One thing I ask people who've used and utilized YouTube and other online platforms is, is there a real sense of community there with other, I guess you call them creators within the TEFL world? Or did you find that it was quite competitive? I mean, what was I don't want to say what was the vibe, but essentially, what was the vibe?
Not at all. I was a bit worried about that initially. But actually, we had a great kind of little community in China. Mike's Home ESL, Mushi English, there was quite a few of us. Andy, the ESL guy, we would talk and, we made a couple of videos together. And, especially Mike's Home ESL, super supportive, right from the beginning. When we first started talking, he was just like, yeah, this is great. Teachers need it. There's no animosity. There's no competitiveness. I think at the end of the day, everyone just wants to help support teachers because we've all been through tough times when you first start to teach. So we know what it's like. It's a good community. There's no, and I'm really thankful for that actually, because I think that would be a sad thing. I know sometimes on the online forums, people can get a little bit down, or they're a bit, always see the sort of pessimistic about teaching and things, but the creator side of things, everyone's very optimistic and like, yeah, it's hard, but let's do it. Let's help people.
And talking of the community, do you have any stories from people who have watched your videos and got in touch, or they've used the materials that you put on your website and they've come back to you with a story about how they've launched their own careers in TEFL?
Well, there was one person that commented, was like, "Oh my God, thanks to you, I've just been promoted to supervisor. I've been watching your videos for years, implementing your ideas. Now finally, I'm getting promoted, and I'm making more money than I was before, and I just want to say thank you." And that makes me really happy. And I've been working with a few teachers like recently as well, as part of the online course, and they are telling me, "Oh, I didn't know what I was doing before, and now I feel confident now. Now I feel like I know what I'm doing," and that just makes life much better. Some teachers have spoken to me, we're at a point where they're crying, because they don't want to get into the class, and that's what I used to be like. I'd be so stressed about teaching the next day, and it'd just be so hard, makes you want to quit. And so I've had teachers come back and say, "Thanks to you, like I don't feel like that anymore. Like I'm enjoying teaching again." And classes are running so much smoother. And I love hearing from teachers when that's the case, because it makes all this hard work that goes into, running Mooncake so worth it.
I did tell you off for being too self-deprecating earlier. So on the other side of that, do you take a certain measure of pride in the fact that when you were getting started with teaching, I don't want to paraphrase you, but you definitely took lessons from people who were doing what you do online. They're creating materials on YouTube, that kind of thing. Do you take pride in the fact that you've been able to A, give back to the online TEFL community, but also B, be to other people what TEFL experts online were to you, if that makes sense? Is that something that you take a source of pride in?
Yeah, I think so. Mainly because, as I said, when I was initially looking online for ideas and like figuring out how to do this, I really did look up to, like I said, Genki English and the Ooga Googly lady, especially the Ooga Googly lady. She had a lot of the same kind of humor that I love. And I was like, yeah, I love teaching people. Like in, my previous career, that's what I was doing. I would be a fitness instructor, or I teach kids sports and things. So I'd always loved that kind of that side of helping people. So now that I'm able to do that, online on a bigger level and internationally, I'm proud of it. I'm really proud of what Mooncake's become, and I hope that it continues to be able to help and support people. Because as I say, I know what it's like when you first start, and that feeling of this kind of desperation, and I'd hate to think that people were struggling in that way, especially when working with kids and doing such an important job, because it really is important.
So can you tell the listeners what you're up to now, what Mooncake English is up to now, and what life looks for you? Because you've left China. When was it you left China?
Last year, yeah. I'm in Canada now.
So tell us what you're up to now and what purpose Mooncake English serves in terms of how you're interacting with other teachers nowadays.
Sure. So, as I said, I left China last year, and that was I think everyone went through COVID, where it was a challenging time for everyone. So through the past couple of years, I take a bit of a break from Mooncake in terms of producing videos, but behind the scenes, I've been working a lot to create an online course called the Confident Teacher Program, which is for new teachers that are working with young kids in kindergarten, that have that feeling of like desperation of, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing, or maybe working in a school that doesn't have that structure there, and they know they're not getting training or support, and helping them feel, more proud and confident in the classroom about what they're doing. So I've been working on this program for the past couple of years. It's incorporating a lot of the curriculum development stuff that I've done and all the experiences that I've had over the years, putting it together in this one program that gives, as I said, teachers the information that they need to recognize what's going on in their classrooms, and the confidence to be able to then create classes and speak to parents, and make adjustments that they need. So we've just launched that course now. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on going to the future. Still going to be producing some videos again very soon, get the channel going again. So I think that's really important. It's just having that quick resource for teachers. Sometimes hey, I need a quick game idea. You go online, that's super important. So I want to make sure that I'm still supporting teachers in that way, and then continuing to make some resources that are good. And my aim has always been able to do this at a professional level. I think that's what I found was missing from the space, was professional information presented in a in especially in videos as well, in a quality kind of way that is simple for everyone to understand, but gets the information across quickly. So the plan is to continue that way with the videos, and hopefully support some teachers that are just starting their career and help them get going in a confident way.
And talking of getting going and confidence, I mean, I don't want to add more competition to your field. That's not the objective. But let's say there's a younger Jema Perry somewhere who's thinking, maybe I want to design my own content, upload, try and build a following. Mm-hmm. What would you tell those TEFL teachers? What advice would you give for those who are just starting out? Just
start doing it. Like, I think that was the biggest step for me, was making that first video. And it's like a process, initially I was really if you go back into my channel, you just look at some of the early videos I made. I think they were like about interviews and things, but I'm so robotic on the camera and I'm not comfortable, and yeah, some of the audio as well, like you say, audio is really challenging. So the audio is bad in some of the videos. So just start doing it, and just know that you're not going to make fantastic videos and people aren't going to watch you right away. But by doing it, by starting and committing to continue making content and putting things out there, you'll make progress. You'll learn more, and you'll grow over time. You just got to start. And in terms of competition, I don't see it as competition. Like, I'm learning from people all the time. Like, the teachers that I speak to, they have great ideas, and that's important. We can't just focus on one person and be like, well, that's the way it works. Because my style of teaching is not going to work for everyone, nor is like Mike's Home ESL or Mushi or whoever. And that's why we need these different ideas, because people learn from that and then they create their own way of teaching, which is how we all learn and continue to grow.
Excellent. And just to sort of take us right back to the start, because this podcast is absolutely whizzed by. Like, there are so many questions I'm not going to be able to ask because we just don't have time. But going back to that first kindergarten class, you're not long TEFL certified. It wasn't always your life plan, but here you are teaching a group of kindergarten kids. Let's say for someone who's going to be in that scenario in September, October time, they're teaching a first class, they've moved country, it's all very overwhelming, but they are adjusting to it. What's the biggest piece of advice you'd give to that person? Because they're maybe feeling a little overwrought, but they still have that ambition and that fire in them. What would you tell them?
I think, number one, be kind to yourself. You're learning, it's regardless of what expectations are around you, you're not going to know everything right away. That's normal. And the worst classes you have, you're going to learn from and grow. So just be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself. And then second is reach out, look at other teachers that, have got experience and are successful in their classrooms, and reach out to them. Hey, can I come watch your class? I'd love to learn from you. I've never known anyone be insulted by that. Teachers are going to be happy to support you. So just don't be afraid to reach out and be open to growth. It's, you learn with time, but unfortunately that does take a few tough classes initially.
Okay, well, as long as folk are prepared for that, I think they'll have an excellent TEFL career like you've had. So where can people find you, and where can people find Mooncake English? And finally, what's next for you? What are you working on just now?
Obviously I'm on YouTube, Mooncake English. You can follow me on Instagram as well. I post lots of ideas, songs and chants and things there. And then obviously the website, mooncakeenglish.com, and you can find more information about the Confident Teacher program there too. So if you're teaching for the first time and you really are feeling quite lost, the program has everything you need to get you started. And that's where my focus will be. So over the next few months, you'll start seeing me on YouTube again. And I'll be, as I say, focusing on that Confident Teacher program to help support teachers as they start their career.
Brilliant. I'm certain so many TEFL teachers are going to come away from that feeling so much better about their abilities and their ideas. But Jema, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And as I say, this could have gone on a few hours longer with all the questions I had. But thanks so much for giving us your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to I Taught English Abroad, a podcast series by the TEFL org. To keep up to date with every episode, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your streaming platform of choice. And we love feedback, so feel free to leave us a review on any platform you like. For more information about the TEFL org, or about teaching English as a foreign language in general, head on over to tefl.org. That's TEFL.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.